up with some really good stuff that you've been posting on IG. So I appreciate that, man. So going back to,
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
yeah, no doubt, brother. You got that. You put that warrior stuff up, and I love that, man. But I also know this about you, that we're both built. We're warriors. We've been through hardcore battles. We're built to fight. We're in the fitness arena. We're working and training our bodies, to absorb. But we're the guys that they're going to send in when everything's not all right. You know what I mean? And so I get that about us. We're the guys that aren't going to be celebrated until we're needed. You know what I mean? And then when we're needed,
Yes, sir.
everybody's going to be like, hey, can you come help? Can you, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. And so thank you, man, just for being stable, steady, and consistent in your posting and what you're doing, brother. So God bless you for that. So
thank you, Dutch.
Kind of coming back to this message of talking about rejection is direction. This is part of my speaking framework that I share all over the country. And the reason that I have that message, and the reason that I can speak it with such confidence, and the reason why, in a theological setting, you would say that I believe that I'm anointed to share that message, is because I have lived through it. And the things that we live through are the things that we are really gifted, experienced, and anointed to do. And so I want to encourage us that's listening to this call, whatever you have been through, the tough things that you have experienced, the hard road that you have traveled, those things are the things that once you come through. Now, listen, don't sit down in the middle. The only reason that we stop in the middle of our hardship is so that we can take rest, so that we can wash our face, and so that we can eat some food. And that's all biblical. When you read the story about the prophet Elisha, when Elisha had fought the 850 prophets that were of Baal and Ashtoreth, when he called down fire on wet logs, and when he defeated King Ahab and his wife Jezebel, because they had all of these false idols that they were worshiping in the kingdom of Jerusalem. In so doing, it says that Jezebel made a threat to him and he went on the run. And, this guy was so scared. Some of you guys can identify with it. Look, I'm a warrior, but I can remember being in rooms where I felt the presence of dark demonic oppression. Like I literally felt it crawling up my back. And that only really happens for people that are in real warfare or who are really walking out a spiritual journey. People that are naive to it, it may happen to them. We've heard of what's it called, the sleep, when the hag spirit comes on you in sleep. That was something that happened to me long before I ever understood it. But when you have those paralyzing spirits of paralysis that come on you, and you're struggling and you can't get out, and you're laying there and you want to say the name of Jesus, but and then if there's anybody in the room next to you, they're like, what do you, are you okay? What are you going through? And it's because you had a hag spirit. You had sleep paralysis. And long story short, I say this about Elijah because, Jezebel made a threat that she was going to take his life within the next 24 hours. This joker went on the run. It says he was running so fast that he passed the chariot that was being pulled by a horse, right? That's some kind of not just fear, but also think, the conversation I was just having with DC, think of what kind of condition this man had to be in to be able to run that fast for that long, right? And this is something that we're missing today, certainly within the household of faith, because we have so many fat and out of shape, people who are Christians. They have no work ethic. They have no exercise. They're not going to be able to run the race. They're sitting in their chair with a damn big gulp. You know what I'm saying? And so who are you going to call on when the battle arrives? Are you going to call on the guy with the big gulp, or are you going to call on the guy who's been training for the battle? You know what I mean? Now, if you're in a situation where you don't know anybody who's training for the battle, right? Psalms 144:1. The Lord has trained my hands to fight and my fingers for battle, right? Who are you going to call on when you're in trouble? And the point is that for me, and I'm not going to say that this is an absolute, but for me, this is an experiential rule. I don't call on people because they appear to have great success. I call on people who have been through what I'm going through to help me get through. I need somebody who has traveled down my road. Let me tell you why. Because you can go, when you're going through a difficult season and life is kicking the crap out of you and you can't figure out why, because like you're tuning your life up. It's not like you're living out of bounds. It's not like you're in full-blown rebellion. It's like, I'm doing the best I can in my flesh. You know what I'm saying? And I'm learning how to call upon the Spirit of God to overrule my flesh, to give me wisdom, to give me direction. Spirit of God, guide me, lead me. And in so doing that, you're doing your very best. But you get to the place of where you understand that you have to find and identify with people who've been through it. Otherwise, they judge you while you're in it. Let me give you an example. I had somebody who stepped up and they were partnering with me in ministry. And anybody who wants to partner with me in ministry, listen, I can promise you, if you want to partner with me, none of it will go into my pocket. 100% of it will go toward the mission and carrying out what we've been called to do. A lot of that for me has been taking the gospel into prisons, sharing it with hardcore dudes. Like, in prisons, I always go after the hardest. I go after the leaders. I go after the guys that are in there for hardcore crimes, violent crimes. One, because I believe that Christ can change their heart, because I watched him change mine. I saw him take a hardened heart that I had, and I watched him soften it and put back into me a heart of flesh after I lived so long with a heart of stone. Why did I have a heart of stone? Because I had been rejected. I had been abandoned, never met my real father. My stepfather didn't know how to father me. And so he rejected me. He didn't know he was rejecting me, but the closer I tried to draw to him for love, he would push me away. I remember kissing my stepdad on the lips one night before I went to bed. I don't know. I was 5, 6 years old. Man, he blasted me. He blasted me. I was like, oh my God. And I ran to my room confused because all I was looking for was affection from a man. I wanted healthy affection. I'm not talking about unnatural affection. I wanted affection from a man. And so the reality is I'm going to have patience with somebody that has that type of a story, where somebody who doesn't have that type of a story may not have patience. So I had a guy that had partnered with me, and he was a very wealthy guy. He had a business. He sold it, made a lot. I'm talking $100 million off of selling his business. He partnered with me for $500 a month, which was excellent because it helped me with mission. It helped me with travel. When I'm going 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours away, it helps me with covering a hotel. It helps me with products that I give away to the men and women who are incarcerated, the tools and stuff that I leave with them so that after I'm gone, they have reminders of the message and they can lean into it. And long story short, so $500 was very significant to me. I don't take that as a small gift. That was a wonderful gift, but it was a very small thing for him. He had plenty of money. And what I have found with the leadership that I have sat under, and I had this conversation with my buddy Jonathan Spinks yesterday, is that I sat under leadership that would utilize my gift, my talent, my skill, my passion. And certainly when I was younger, man, like I was just hungry, man. Like I would like, let's go. Like I didn't need much notice at all. Like, let's get in the car, let's go. Let's go speak to people in a prison. Let's go do some outreach somewhere. Let's go to the hood, and break it down. And so this is where I was as a young man, and utilizing that passion for leaders who didn't do anything to make me better. They didn't pour into me. They didn't send me to training. They didn't provide me with training. They essentially gave me things to do that would help them carry out their mission without ever replacing in me what I was pouring out. And this is where a lot of people are today, because here's what I'm really recognizing. I don't know many good leaders. I know that we want to assign titles to people. Oh man, he's a great leader. Why? Because he preached 40 minutes, a dynamic message on Sunday morning. Like, do you think that that's what makes somebody a great leader? What makes somebody a great leader is that the people that are under their leadership become great leaders. That's why in the Bible, you don't see where any decisions are made about people in the first generation. Your greatness isn't determined in the first generation, Abram. Abram, you're not going to be a great leader just because you obeyed God's voice and you stepped out away from your family and you find yourself, in the wilderness with your wife and with your tribe, and you go through hardship and you go through famine, what's going to make you great is not that you lay down under your wife's recommendation with her doggone gorgeous. I know Hagar was a bad to the bone. I know Hagar was a bad chick, and I know she was a bad chick because when Sarah recommended, hey, I want you to lay down with my maidservant, since I can't give you a child, lay down with my maidservant Hagar. Look, it doesn't say that Abram thought about it. It doesn't say that he contemplated it. It doesn't say that he had a conversation with Sarai about it. It says that he was down. It's a, hey, next sentence, she's pregnant. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like he vacillated about that decision. He was like, man, my wife just gave me permission to lay down with this bad little, Egyptian chick. So let's go. Long story short, I don't mean to offend any women that are listening to the call or men. It's just how I interpret the scripture. Okay. Long story short, Abraham isn't great because he made a decision to, stay faithful to his wife or to, per her permission, go with Hagar. What made Abram great is that, first of all, he was circumcised and he became Abraham. Secondly, he ended up, God granted him a child with his wife Sarai, whose womb was closed. We know that Abraham wasn't the problem. He didn't have a prostate issue. He didn't have a low sperm count. We know that because as soon as he laid with Hagar, they had a baby. So we know that Abram wasn't the problem. It was Sarai's womb that was sealed up. So there was something that God had to do in Sarai. And I think that Sarai's failure in offering Hagar to her husband is an area where she was dysfunctional, where she was dealing with rejection, right? Because here she is, she's a woman. One of the pedigrees of a woman is that you would be fertile and that you would give your husband a child. In particular, they wanted them to have a male child, but she's unable to produce. And so she's dealing with rejection in a way that caused her to want to give another woman to her man. Think that through. That's a whole nother message. Long story short, what ends up happening is she finally becomes pregnant with Isaac. Now, we have to go through some tribulation with Isaac and Ishmael because Sarah really, it's interesting because after she offered up her maidservant, she then gets angry when she has her own child, right? How many times have you seen this? Hagar was good, as long as she was doing what Sarai wanted her to do. But then as soon as she was able to have a child herself, now Hagar became a real enemy to the camp and she had to be sent away. Let me cut to the chase in the story. What makes Abraham great is, one, he was circumcised. And I think that that's a very important part of the journey if you understand why he was circumcised, okay? Number two is he had the child of promise with Sarai. Number three, just like he poured into Ishmael, which is the child with Hagar, you got to remember for like 15, 16 years, he poured into Ishmael as though Ishmael was the child of promise. That's why when you look at the line of Ishmael, they are they're rich in biblical history until they get to the Quran, because the Quran then corrupts everything that's in the Torah and the Injil. The Injil is the gospel, right? Because they want to basically just erase everything that's written in Old Testament and New Testament history so that they can justify a false doctrine that's part of their Quran. That's a whole nother conversation. Love to have it because I've been studying that for a while too. But let's get to the point. So Ishmael was trained in all the things of Abraham, all the history of Yahweh. But it's Isaac that has to take the promise forward. He pours into Isaac. Isaac is the child of promise, but you don't see where Isaac did anything significant. You don't read anything in Isaac's life where he had this amazing conquest, or he defeated the enemy, or he took terror. Like, you don't read anything about Isaac other than he's the promise. Like, that's really it. There's not much more that's significant. But what happens is, because Isaac was trained, he became the one that passes on the faith. So Abram receives the faith. Isaac is the one who inherits the faith. And then it's Jacob and Esau, but it's Jacob that then becomes the one who is the third generation of faith. Why is that important? That's leadership. That's great leadership. And we got to stop giving all of these leaders, pastors, titles of leader. Just because you're a pastor, you're not a leader. And it's frustrating because what happens is we see these same pastors fall, right, into all kind of folly, whether it's financial folly, whether it's female folly, whether it's arrogance in the pulpit, whether it's, pressuring people for money, whatever the deal is. There's so many things that pastors are falling from. Let me give you my opinion. It's because they were never appointed to be pastors. They were self-initiated, self-proclaimed, and they went in and started the church based off of their charisma and not off of their character. And so when they get into a place of where they are being idolized, they end up losing any fear or reverence of God. And that's why they do things in the pulpit that you would never expect someone to do. Like the guy up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's actually a really good speaker, kind of feminine, too feminine for me. Oh, what's the guy's name? The black dude up there that bought a whole bunch of real estate up. Can't remember his name. Really good speaker, very dynamic, very charismatic. But he's taking a Bible and like kicking it across the pulpit, and then pouring syrup on it to suggest that the Bible is just another book. And you're just sitting there thinking, like, how dare you? Like, how dare you? Like, you have no reverence in front of a crowd of thousands of people. You have no reverence for things that should be kept holy. And I'm not saying that the Bible, the book itself, is holy, but the words are quick and they're sharp and they're powerful, and they're sharp like a two-edged sword, rightly dividing the word of truth. It literally divides spirit from soul, is what Hebrews chapter 4:16 says. And so, what is my point? We have lost this reverence for being in the front of the church. We have lost this reverence for being a figure that is, not just good looking or charismatic or well dressed, but that you honor holy things, that you don't, discard, dismantle, disrespect holy things in the pulpit. You watch your mouth. You know why? Because you should have a leader who has a prophetic anointing that's standing over you and is telling you when you're saying things that are sharp or that they're wrong or that the presentation is not good and you're harming the sheep. Now, here's where I step in. This is why I become really angry to where church people will defend pastors who are killing and hurting and harming helpless sheep. Because I sat through leadership like this. I sat through leadership in a mega church in Washington, D.C., where the pastor fleeced the people for money every freaking week. Every week. It was $1,000 offering line. It was a $5,000. It was a $10,000 offering. It was, hey, you should go sell your house and bring the money and give it to the church. And somehow twisting it in a way that made people believe that, God was going to give them a bigger, better, nicer house. Like the theology was so off and so crooked, but because the Christians who sat in there and listened were so illiterate, because they spent no time in the word of God. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15. Like, if we could really get on board that if I knew the word, I wouldn't get fleeced in the sanctuary. I couldn't get fleeced. So I left someplace that was, a big money grab. It was definitely in my opinion, a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was somebody that influenced people in a very, very big way, but left them at the end of it in worse condition than they were when it started. I watched marriages fall apart because they gave offerings they couldn't afford to give. I watched people lose their homes because they were giving away money to the church and the pastor. Now, the pastor, they were giving, I can remember when I was there, they gave the pastor a brand new, like 500 SEL Mercedes Benz for his birthday. Like it's so driven in tangible things. And the way that the pastor would preach it is that how can I lead you into prosperity if I'm not prosperous myself? Well, let me tell you the difference. You got 5,000 people that you can fleece for money. And most people that are sitting in churches don't. Like most people sitting in churches don't have somewhere to go to ask for help, to get support when they're in crisis. You know, can I borrow 5,000? Can I borrow $10,000? Like these are real middle class, you know, issues and amounts of money. What's my point with this? Just because it's a pastor who's in front of thousands of people on Sunday morning does not mean that they're a good leader. You're not a good leader until you pass it on for 3 generations. You should at least have leaders that are under you who are finding and having success, and they should have people under them who are finding and having success. But I'm not talking about the good old boys club. I'm not talking about the people who have to buy their way in. I'm talking about when you can take somebody that has nothing and you can raise that person up. You can provide them with a work opportunity. You can provide them with training. You can provide them with access to success. And there's a lot of people that have gifting, talent, and ability, but don't have access. And this is where for us, you know, my cry to leaders is, why don't you make a way to find access for people that are under your leadership so that they can find and have success? I'm talking about balanced access. I'm not talking about this disproportionate prosperity that we have in the church today. I'm talking about a good weight, an equal weight is what Solomon says in Proverbs, where you have the weight of, you know, provision for your life, but you also have the weight of taking care of other people, being generous, according to, you know, Paul in 1 Corinthians, right? When you give not grudgingly nor out of necessity. 1 Corinthians, I think it's 9:6. For God loves a cheerful giver. And when's the last time you've seen somebody give cheerfully? Let me tell you when it's hard to give cheerfully. Not saying you can't, but when it's hard to give cheerfully is when you don't have it. It's easy to give cheerfully when you have it, when there's an abundance, when there's, you know, when it's not coming out of your need. Like it's a hard thing when you have to decide, do I pay my electric bill or do I give, you know, $150 to my church? Anyway, don't know how I got caught on that. It goes back to leadership. Just because somebody is a pastor does not make them a good leader. And I've been crying out, looking for good leaders in the Christian community. And I'm on YouTube looking all the time. Like, just show me somebody that I can grab a hold of and I can follow their leadership. And the problem is, all we ever get is a Sunday morning charismatic message. Difficult thing. Now, I'm not saying that they're not out there. I'm just telling you that I have not found somebody that makes my baby jump. I have not found somebody that makes me say, oh, wow, I really admire, I like that person. I like their leadership. You know why? Because I'm looking for a clear glass of water. And most of our leadership, the water is tainted. It's not pure. It's got a lot of motives in it. It's got motives, you know, for self indulgences. It's got motives in it. You know, I just watched the video yesterday about a pastor in Houston, Keon Henderson. When his church was blown over by a storm, he comes out basically saying that God told him that the church was blown over by a storm because he was thinking too small. And that he, you know, God wanted him to think bigger. And so then he essentially, I'm just going to call it what it looks like, he fleeces the congregation with, if I can get 2,100 people to give $2,100 over the next 21 days, that's $4 million. I'll be able to build the kind of church that I want to be able to build. Like, come on, man. Can I just get a pure glass of water? Can I just get a drink from a glass that's not attached with a whole bunch of motives for how to get my money and how to figure out where to put it? And you know what people will tell you? If you ever want to raise money, start a church. And you know what I know? I know people that were gifted and talented. Ready? Let's go to the fourfold, fivefold ministry. The what is it? The prophet, evangelist, apostle, pastor, teacher, right? Let's go to that. You know how many people that I know were gifted to be evangelists? They were gifted to go outside the walls of the church. They were gifted to talk to people who are in dark communities. They were gifted to talk to people who never step into the building of a church, that were gifted. And they had the gift of oration. Like, they could tell stories and they could transition it and they could close the deal and they could cause people to want to come into faith and to live and to walk with Christ in a pure way. You know how many of them ended up starting their own churches because they couldn't find churches to support them in their gift? So now you got somebody who's called to be an evangelist to go outside the walls of the church. Now they spend all of their time inside the walls of the church and the gospel never gets out. So the church is built what? For people to have to come in. The only way they're going to hear the gospel is if you go into the building, because there is no desperation to reach people who are outside the walls of a church. And it's a shame. It's a shame. And I'm so grateful. Here's the reason why I'm so passionate about it. I came to Christ on the floor of a jail cell. And it was an old man. He was probably 65, 70 years old when he came. But the Lord set up a dynamic of where I got into a fist fight while I was in the jail. They gave me the opportunity to access what they called church. It was just a 6x9 prison cell. Me and another gentleman, Andrew Kirkman, who was in on a life sentence for kingpin charges. I was in on trafficking cocaine charges. We're sitting in the cell together next to each other. We don't know each other. And a 65-year-old man, 70-year-old man comes shuffling across the floor. And for 10 minutes, he begins to share with me that, that my life can change. And I look burdened. He said 8 words that changed my life. You look burdened. Can I pray for you? And I wasn't looking for prayer, wasn't looking for church. If I hadn't gotten into that fight, I wouldn't have even responded to the call to go. But because of the fight I did, God orchestrated that to get me to go where I wouldn't have gone. And long story short, this man prayed with me, very short prayer. But he got me to say the words out of my mouth. And by doing so, I was giving the God of all creation permission to come into my heart and my life and to help me in my crisis, in my desperation, and fix me. Now, here's the problem. When I first enter into this relationship, I'm talking to him about what I want him to fix. And what I had to learn over time was he doesn't fix what I want fixed. He fixes me so that other things can get fixed. I was the one that was broken. I was the one that was making bad decisions. I was the one that was created with a heart that loved people, right? Before I knew God, I loved people. And when my heart got broken through rejection, it caused my heart to become hardened. It caused what Ezekiel 36:26 calls a heart of stone. But it was when I allowed God to enter in through that prayer. It was a permissive prayer. It was me giving him permission. Holy Spirit, come into my heart, begin to speak to me and to help me and to change me. And as I started taking those steps to change within myself, what I discovered was God was working out all the other things that I wanted him to change. I was looking at a 38-year prison sentence that turned into a mandatory 7. I ended up doing a total of 3.5 because when I went into prison, I was changing. I was a shot caller on the inside, but I was a shot caller for good. I was the one who was hosting Bible studies on Sunday, every morning at 7 a.m., every evening at 7 p.m. I'm sharing this with us so that you guys can understand that there's something required of us in order for our situation to change. And so I was very faithful. I was dedicated. I was devoted to it. And I was doing those things. As a result of that, when I ended up on that 7-year mandatory sentence, because the prisons were overcrowded, my prison sentence got cut to 3.5 years. Listen, I couldn't have orchestrated that. I couldn't have done it. But because I was dedicated to changing myself, because I was pursuing education on the inside, because I was in study release, I was taking college courses at UNC Chapel Hill. Later, I was released to do study release at North Carolina Central University. Here, you ready? Rejection is direction. UNC Chapel Hill, I had a 4.0 GPA in my coursework with them in the prison. I was locked up in North Carolina. When I became qualified for study release, UNC Chapel Hill didn't want a convicted felon on their campus. I guess I can understand, right? I can understand. But that's rejection. I'm like sitting here saying, yo, I got like a 4.0 GPA in all my coursework from your university, from your professors, and you don't want me at your school. The beauty of it was I had somebody helping me navigate it. He went to an HBCU. For those of you who don't know what that is, Historical Black College University. And in so doing, they opened their arms to me, this young blonde-haired, blue-eyed white kid going to a historical black college university where I excelled. I had a 3.85 because I was doing my schoolwork while I was still incarcerated. So every day I would leave out, go to the college. Every evening I would come back to the prison, right? When I finally get released from prison, I wanted to get back closer to my son, Trip. So in that attempt to do so, I had a job. The job gave me a job transfer. I ended up going to Washington, D.C., and I transferred to Howard University, which is a very prestigious HBCU. And I ended up there with a 4.0 GPA. Excel. But understand, I don't get to Howard if I don't get rejected by UNC Chapel Hill. And so that for me was something that I had to embrace. I didn't understand it. It didn't feel good. I didn't like being rejected. I'd like the thought of being a UNC Tar Heel, right? That's Michael Jordan's school. Like there was something about that I wanted to identify with. But where they did not want me, somebody else embraced me. That was North Carolina Central and then ultimately Howard University. Why do I share all of this? Because I've had a life filled with wanting good leaders in my life, and all I found is good pastors. Not even good pastors, just good preachers. Because most of our pastors today, they don't even know their flock. They don't know their sheep. Like one of the things about the Old Testament and the New Testament is, you know, if you were a sheep herder, you smelled like your sheep. Hear what I'm saying here. Get this, register this. If you were a sheep herder, you smelled like your sheep. Why? Because you spent time with your sheep. We got pastors today that don't even know the names of people that they call their sheep. Matter of fact, if you don't give a significant amount of money, now if you give significant money, you know, they're going to look you up because they got you on the books. They're recording. They're going to make sure they take care of you because they want to make sure that bread keeps coming. I'm not talking about every pastor, and I'm not talking about every church. I'm just talking about the ones that I know. And what I'm saying to you is don't mistake somebody who can preach a good message because they wear a nice outfit, you know, and today, I mean, look, I'm a fashion guy. I love clothes. My son loves clothes. We're into it. My son will buy the high-end fashion, and I will make some low-end stuff look real good. Come on, somebody talk to your boy. Somebody, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tip my glass to that. That was so good. I'm going to take a drink. Go ahead, Justin. Nephew, take a drink. You know what I mean? But, you know, we like fashion, but it's become such a doggone fashion show where the church that I attend here in Dallas, or I used to attend because the leader that I was with there, I'm out. Long story short, he's now been replaced by his daughter, his son-in-law, and I mean, every week it's a freaking fashion show. It's a $6,000 outfit. It's, you know, look at me in my Balenciaga. Balenciaga means Baal is king. Baal is a false god in the Old Testament. And we have people who are calling themselves Christians, pastoring churches, wearing Balenciaga on the front of their shirt, which is an antichrist. It means Baal is God. My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. And they'll have their doggone Balenciaga shirt on, their Balenciaga shoes with their Gucci belt, and they have no clue or no identity that this is all worship to hedonism. This is all Baal worship. Baal worship was worshiping the God who blesses and increases them. And that was why when the children of Israel left Egypt, the first thing they did when Moses was up on the mountain too long, speaking to Yahweh, the God of all creation, was they took all of their gold and they formed a calf, because the golden calf was something that represented the God of wealth and provision. That's why they worshiped him. Now, here's the other thing. Baal comes with its trinity, Ashtoreth, which is the female false god, and Molech. Molech is the god that in order to worship Baal, you had to sacrifice your children to Molech. Look at what we're seeing today that's happening in society right now. We just had a woman who strangled and murdered her 3 children, gets arrested and goes to trial for it, and she's raised over $1 million on GoFundMe to defend her from people who embrace abortion in the world. And somehow they have attached themselves to this woman killing her children to being an endorsement for being able to murder their babies in the womb. You know, whatever your stance is, like just think of this. What you don't realize is that that is the worship of Molech. Anytime there's abortion, it is the worship of a false god. Just because you don't know it's the worship of a false god doesn't mean that's not what it is. That's the problem is that we're ignorant because we don't read the scriptures. We don't know the word. And because we don't know the word, we end up worshiping and idolizing false gods. Like I'll go back to the fashion stuff. Many of these fashion brands are named after Greek gods. Greek gods are literally fallen angels who have assignments in the earth. But if you don't know your Bible, you're not going to know that every time you overpay a $10,000 leather bag, come on, seriously? You really think that bag is worth $10,000, $6,000? You think that belt is worth $1,500? You think that shirt is worth? Listen, these are all transactions of worship. And I understand you don't get it and you may think I'm crazy. Study the scriptures that tells us when you are making these unreasonable transactions and you're happy to do it. Oh my God, you can't wait to give $10,000 to get that Louis Vuitton bag or that Gucci bag or whoever your favorite designer is. Not understanding that these are all acts of worship, but you won't give $100 to the old lady that's in your neighborhood that her electricity is getting ready to get turned off. You won't give her $100, but you'll pay $10,000 for a freaking bag. This is all false worship, guys. Know the scriptures. Get in tune with the God of all creation. I know I'm kind of stumping right now, so let me take it back. Good leadership isn't a good speaker. Good leadership isn't a pastor. Good leadership is somebody that transitions success into the lives of 3 generations. Their generation, the next generation, and the next generation, which means my assignment is whatever level of success the Lord allows me to have, I've got to make sure that I'm making that available to either my son or somebody else that's on this call. I've got people that are on this call that are joined to me in leadership. They work with me. They believe in the vision that God has given me, and they've partnered with me. So it's important for me that I make sure that I don't have an unequal balance. What good is it for me to have great success and the people that are helping me have it are struggling to pay their rent? Come on, guys. Come on. So what I'm saying is that I wish that we would become more intelligent about our walk and about what leadership is and what it looks like. And again, I want to go back to leadership is not people having to pay their way into your leadership. Great leadership is when people don't have to pay and they can use what would come to you and they're able to give it to others who have need underneath of them. Anyway, a whole nother message. Let me open the floor up, man. We got 9 minutes left. Let me hear what you guys have to say. Brandon, good to see you on the call. Niev, great to see you on the call. Let me open up the floor, man. You guys talk to me. I stumped for about 40 minutes.
No, that was I didn't get to hear everything, man, but I'm glad I jumped on. I was at the gym working out and I saw the message. I was like, man, I gotta get on this. I gotta get on. And this is great because I saw Dutch this weekend, and that Saturday I was spending time with my family in Dallas, and I asked him, I was like, man, because I know my situation is not ideal for me right now with my house. I mean, there's my house right here, right? Brand new, first year. My wife left me. We're separated right now, and she said I have to pay the mortgage on my own right now because she can't do it. Um, so my financial livings is in a situation where it's not. I'm doing my best to breathe right now. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, um, and I found solitude at the gym, which is keeping me away from all the negative stuff out there, right? That was taking control of my situations beforehand.
Right.
So I was talking to my aunt and uncle, who's faith driven, and they've always told me to tithe. So this is feeding into this right now perfectly, man. Because he asked me again, did you tithe? And I said, Steve, Uncle Steve, I said, I want to. It's not that I don't want to. It's just, how do I do that mathematically and live? You know? And he says, math is math in our world. But when it comes to God, math doesn't, for some, it just doesn't exist. The math doesn't equate. You just do it. Okay? If your mortgage is 3,300 and you get 4,000 from the military every month, or 4,100 from the military every month, then you give 10%, no matter what. Whatever you get a paycheck, 10%. Every paycheck that you give, receive to the penny, 10%. Don't cheat God, you know. And I said, well, where? He goes, wherever you believe it does the best, right? And I was talking about you, Dutch. I said, well, I don't really belong to a church anymore. I have one in my neighborhood, but I don't go. I actually started talking to Dutch, and they know about you from last time I met you, the first time,
Mhm.
2 months ago. And I said, well, I could give it to Dutch. He goes, so that's a that's a start, Brandon. You believe in him, so there's a reason why you guys met. You
Yeah.
know, and just pray before you give it away. Say,
Yeah.
God, I'm giving it. It's up to you to put it in the directions or the hands where you need it best fit, where you see best fit. You know, he goes, Brandon, I personally, I give some to this church and I give some to my cousin at home to his church. I say, here, give it to your pastor, let them deal with it. And God's going to take control after it leaves your hands. You know, so there's a friend from high school that lives in another state, beautiful wife, beautiful son, who's, I mean, it's a miracle this his son's even alive. All the surgeries, just find out that he's a nurse and a firefighter. He just got cancer, and he's dealing with those medical bills are insane. And they're still doing surgeries on his son. So I'm like, okay, maybe 10% of that $44,000 check, whatever it is, half could go to Dutch, and the other half I could call him and say, hey man, just here for whatever reason y'all need it for medical bills. And you're right, Dutch. Instead of going out and buying stupid material things, I mean, go eat. That's fine. Go to a nice dinner, but come on, like, do you need an expensive $4,000 wallet when you only have 400 in the bank? you know,
And
it's
$4
like,
in the wallet.
yeah, exactly. My wallet's
Yeah.
more expensive than the cash I actually have.
I'd
That doesn't
rather
make
have a
sense.
$4 wallet with $4,000 in it.
Yeah, who cares if it has a Mont Blanc symbol on it?
Right. Right.
So
Let me
give
let
it
me
to,
let me real
yeah.
quick, Brandon, just
Go
because
ahead.
of the sake of time. But we got the second hour that'll be open that you can talk through it. Let me say this first of all, is that thank you for even considering that. Here's where I want to make a distinction. What the church has done is it has implemented and forced tithing on the church today because that is a way to use guilt to get people to give. In other words, if you don't give, somehow there's this guilt that's associated with it. And that's the reason why you're compelled to give. The tithe is an Old Testament teaching, it's not a New Testament teaching. The tithe goes under the Mosaic law. It was something that was implemented with Abraham, with Melchizedek, but it is something that when Christ died on the cross, we moved from the dispensation of law into the dispensation of grace. This is why you'll never see Jesus teach on the tithe as money. The only time Jesus references the tithe is when he talks about the legalist Pharisees and Sadducees would tithe their herbs. It says that they were so specific about the tithe that they would tithe the smallest of their herbs, but they didn't care about the people. That's the only time Jesus even addresses the tithe. The reason why is when he dies on the cross, we move into a dispensation of grace. Why is that important? Because not tithing would bring a curse on you in the Old Testament. Jesus fulfilled that on the cross to where people who believe in him cannot be cursed. Okay? So this is the reason why. So when Paul begins to address giving, you don't see Paul address giving as the tithe. You see him address it as when you give not grudgingly. In other words, you shouldn't have a bad attitude about it, or out of necessity. In other words, it's not a slot machine. You don't give 400 because you're expecting God to give you 4,000. When you have that attitude, it's what cancels out your faith. That motivation behind giving is what literally cancels out God's ability to bless, because God is discerning the heart in our giving. But you don't give grudgingly, you don't give out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. What you do, and let me really stress this, if you decided to partner with me, what you're doing is not tithing. What you're doing is you are partnering with me. And in partnering with me, I'm going to use that to take care of the things ministry-wise that need to be taken care of. It's not going to go to buy me a car, a jet, or a house. That's not what's happening with me. And that is the problem. And the goal with what I'm building with this network of people is that when you partner with me, now we're able, when somebody's in crisis, we as a community of people can come together, where I may not be able to help you with $3,300 for your mortgage because you're in a crisis. We may be able to pull together 20 people that can put up $150 each. You understand what I'm saying? I don't know what that comes to, but that is the goal with this model. That's a New Testament Acts chapter 1 and 2 model of all people had no lack or no need for anything because they all took care of one another. So I don't ask for money on here. Do I need it to carry out mission? Yeah. Like, I would love to just be able to keep my money in my pocket for the things that I need personally, but I have to invest. Dave will tell you, I've got to figure out how to put up credit cards to pay for everything that I want to do ministry wise. And so having somebody to partner with you, that's going to walk with you, that's going to pray. This is another thing. Partnership requires prayer. Anybody that partners with me financially, you better know I'm praying for them. I'm going to pray against the enemy coming to kill, steal, and destroy. But I'm going to pray that God will give you favor, that he will bless you, that he will prosper you in the things that you have to do. Why? Because I'm a partner with you. So anyway, long story short, that's a whole nother teaching. People that have questions on that, man, please put that in my message field. I'd love to address that on a call. But let me hand it back off to you because I got to go on to another call. But Brandon, we're with you. We're praying for you. Nephew, the same. Solomon, Yiv, DC fell off, but Dave, we're all pressing into that place. But let's keep our hearts good, keep our hearts pure. And I love you guys. I got a hop, but I'll talk to you guys. And